Could your fishing and hunting skills actually feed your family for a month? Most guys who fish and hunt assume they'd be fine if things fell apart. You've got rods, you've got a rifle, you know what you're doing out there. But the uncomfortable truth is that almost everything you practice on a normal Saturday at the lake is designed to catch one trophy fish for a photo, not to produce enough calories per day to keep 4 people alive. Sport fishing and recreational hunting will burn more energy than they produce in a survival scenario. That's not an opinion, that's thermodynamics. I learned this the hard way at a civilian SEER course, which stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, run by a retired Army Special Forces instructor named Hicks in the Mark Twain National Forest in central Missouri. 16 of us showed up for a 3-day field exercise. Most of the group were experienced outdoorsmen, hunters, fishermen, guys who'd been in the woods their whole lives. By the end of day 2, only 3 people in the group had managed to produce a positive caloric balance, meaning they'd harvested more calories from the land than their bodies burned trying to get them. The other 13 were running a deficit, getting weaker, getting slower, and all 13 of those guys had spent most of their time doing exactly what felt natural, sitting on a bank with a rod or stalking through the woods looking for deer. The 3 who came out ahead, they built systems. And that's what we're going to cover. The fishing and hunting methods that actually produce enough food to sustain a family when there's no grocery store, no bait shop, and no second chance. We'll go through the calorie math that changes how you think about every method, the passive fishing setups that work while you sleep, the small game approach that outproduces deer hunting by a wide margin in a crisis, and the priority sequence that determines what you do first, second, and third. And near the end, I'll walk through a 72-hour food procurement timeline that a family of 4 can execute with gear you probably already own. Once you see these numbers, you can't unsee them. Your body burns roughly 2,000 to 2,500 calories per day just existing. Breathing, circulating blood, maintaining body temperature. In a survival situation, where you're outdoors, dealing with stress, walking, gathering firewood, and sleeping in rough shelter, that number jumps to 3,000 or higher. Hicks estimated 3,500 as a working baseline for an active adult male in a temperate survival scenario. Active rod and reel fishing, the kind you and I do every weekend, burns approximately 200 to 250 calories per hour. If you fish for 4 hours and catch 1 2-pound bass, you've burned roughly 800 to 1,000 calories. That bass filleted yields about 450 calories of edible protein. You just spent twice the energy you gained. You went backwards. And that's if you caught one. Plenty of days, you catch nothing. 0 calories in, 1,000 calories out. In a survival context, that's the definition of a losing strategy. Hunting is even worse on the math. Still hunting for deer, which means slowly walking through timber, looking and listening, burns about 300 to 400 calories per hour. A full morning of still hunting, 5 hours, costs you 1,500 to 2,000 calories. If you get a deer, you've won. A single whitetail provides roughly 45,000 to 55,000 calories of meat, enough to feed a family of 4 for 2 weeks. But the probability of taking a deer on any given day of hunting, even for experienced hunters, is statistically low. The national harvest success rate for rifle deer season is around 20 to 25% across a full season, which runs multiple days. On any single day, your odds are closer to 5 to 10% depending on the area. Betting your family's food supply on a 5% daily probability while burning 2,000 calories in the attempt is gambling, not planning. You felt this math even if you never calculated it. That afternoon when you hiked 2 miles into public land, sat in a stand for 6 hours in the cold, saw nothing, hiked 2 miles back, and were so exhausted you could barely eat dinner. Your body was screaming for calories you didn't replace. In a normal week, you eat a big meal and recover. In a sustained crisis, that deficit compounds every single day. Passive fishing flips the equation entirely. A trot line is a long mainline heavy cord or paracord stretched across a section of river or lake, with shorter drop lines tied at intervals, each one holding a baited hook. Think of a clothesline strung between two trees, but underwater, with hooks hanging down every few feet. A single trot line with 25 hooks takes about 45 minutes to build and set, burning roughly 150 to 200 calories of effort. Once it's in the water, it costs you nothing. 0 calories per hour. It fishes all night while you sleep, all day while you do other tasks. Building one is simpler than you'd think, even with improvised materials. You need a main line, which can be paracord, bank line, or even heavy monofilament, 50 pounds or stronger, stretched between two anchor points. Trees on opposite banks work. So do stakes driven into the bank and weighted rocks on the far end if you can wade or swim it out. Tie drop lines every 3 to 4 feet along the main line, each one about 18 inches long, roughly the distance from your elbow to your fingertips. On each drop line, tie a circle hook. That's the rounded kind where the point curves back toward the shank. Circle hooks are critical in passive fishing because they hook fish in the corner of the mouth when the fish turns away. A J-hook, the standard kind, requires you to set the hook manually, which you obviously can't do when you're asleep. Hook size matters here. For general survival trot lining where you're targeting catfish, which are the most common and most reliable trotline species across North America, use a size 3/0 to 5/0 circle hook. That's a hook about the length of your thumb from the first knuckle to the tip. It's big enough to hold a 2 to 8 pound catfish, which is the size range you'll encounter most often, and small enough that panfish and drum can still grab the bait. Hicks had us set trot lines on a stretch of the Merrimack River, which runs through the Mark Twain Forest. Wait, I need to back up. I said I'd talk about passive fishing before small game, but the bait question matters here because it connects both. The most effective trot line bait in a survival scenario is the small game you catch with snares, which I'll cover in a minute. Squirrel guts, rabbit entrails, even grasshoppers and grubs work as trot line bait. So the fishing and hunting systems feed each other. Keep that in mind. Back to the trot line. On the Merrimack, our group of 16 set a total of 6 trot lines over 2 evenings. By morning of day 2, those 6 lines had produced 14 channel catfish ranging from about 1 to 4 pounds each. Total estimated edible calories from that haul, roughly 5,400. Total calories spent setting and checking those lines, approximately 1,800 across the entire group. That's a 3-to-1 return. For every calorie you spend, you get 3 back. Compare that to the rod and reel guys who spent day 1 active fishing and came back with 2 small bass between 8 of them, roughly 400 calories total, at a cost of over 6,000 calories of effort. And these weren't bad fishermen. Several of them fished tournaments back home. They knew how to read water, pick the right lure, work a retrieve. None of that mattered because the fundamental approach was wrong. They were spending energy to maybe catch food, while the trotline group was spending a fraction of the energy and letting the river deliver food to them. Think about that. Same river, same 24 hours. The passive group gained 3,600 net calories. The active group lost 5,600. By day 2, the active fishermen were measurably weaker, and the passive group was fed and rested. That gap only widens with each passing day. By day 3, it's the difference between someone who can function and someone who can barely stand up. If you're enjoying this so far, subscribe. We've got more of these coming. Limb lines work on the same principle as trot lines, but are even simpler. A limb line is a single hook on a short length of cord tied to an overhanging tree branch above the water. The branch acts as a natural spring, keeping tension on the line. When a fish takes the bait, the branch flexes and essentially sets the hook. Each limb line takes about 2 minutes to tie. You can set 10 of them along a riverbank in 20 minutes, burning maybe 75 calories total, and they fish passively around the clock. A retired fisheries biologist named Dawson, who runs wilderness skills courses near Lake of the Woods on the Minnesota-Canada border, documented an experiment with his students in 2019. Over a 48-hour period, 12 limb lines set along a creek inlet produced 9 fish, mostly bullhead catfish and small channel cats, totaling roughly 3,200 edible calories. 12 lines, 20 minutes of setup, 3,200 calories. Nobody sat on a bank. Nobody cast a line. The creek did the work. Building a fish trap, sometimes called a fish weir, is the most labor-intensive passive method up front but produces the highest long-term return. A basic funnel trap built from sticks and cordage in a shallow stream takes 2 to 3 hours to construct. You arrange sticks in a V-shape pointing downstream, funneling fish into a narrow opening that leads to an enclosed pen. Fish swim in following the current and can't find their way back out. It's the oldest fishing technology on Earth. Indigenous people on the Apalachicola River in the Florida Panhandle used weir systems that archaeologists have dated to over 4,000 years ago. The caloric investment to build a decent weir is significant, roughly 600 to 800 calories for the initial construction. But once it's built, it catches fish indefinitely with only minor daily maintenance, maybe 10 minutes to check it and clear debris. In productive streams during warm months, a single weir can produce 5 to 15 small fish per day, mostly panfish and creek chub, yielding 800 to 2,500 calories daily at near zero ongoing cost. Over a week, that single structure can produce more food than a month of active rod and reel fishing, shifting to land-based food procurement, and this is where most survival content gets it wrong. The instinct in a crisis is to hunt big game, deer, elk, wild hog if you're in the South. And yes, a deer is a massive caloric windfall, but the energy cost, time investment, and low daily probability make big game hunting a terrible primary strategy. It's a bonus, not a plan. Small game is the answer, specifically squirrels, rabbits, and birds. A gray squirrel yields roughly 500 calories of edible meat. That doesn't sound like much until you consider the math of acquisition. A simple snare, which is a loop of wire or cord set along a travel path, takes about 5 minutes to build and costs almost no energy to set. You can build 20 snares in a morning from a single roll of 22-gauge snare wire, about $8 at any hardware store, a roll roughly the size of a hockey puck. Set those 20 snares along squirrel runs, the visible paths along fallen logs, fence lines, and the bases of oak trees where you see chewed acorn shells, and check them twice a day. Hicks showed us data from military survival training exercises spanning over a decade. In hardwood forests during fall, a line of 20 squirrel snares produces an average of 2 to 4 squirrels per day. At 500 calories each, that's 1,000 to 2,000 calories daily from an investment of maybe 30 minutes of checking and resetting. Rabbits are even better on the calorie per snare ratio. A single cottontail produces roughly 1,100 calories. Rabbit snares set near brush piles, briar patches, and field edges average 1 to 2 catches per 10 snares per day in good habitat. Combined, a realistic snare line of 20 units, 10 for squirrels and 10 for rabbits, maintained by one person spending about an hour a day, can produce 2,000 to 4,000 calories daily. That's one person's full survival caloric need from snares alone, leaving the rest of the family free to manage water, firewood, and shelter. One critical limitation you need to plan around. If you're in a northern climate and this happens during deep winter, passive fishing and most snaring becomes dramatically harder. Frozen lakes and rivers shut down trot lines and limb lines entirely unless you have an ice auger or axe to maintain open holes. And even then, checking lines in sub-zero conditions burns calories at an accelerated rate. Squirrels are less active in extreme cold, reducing snare productivity by roughly half. Rabbit snaring stays productive through winter because rabbits are active year-round, but your body's caloric demands spike to 4,000 or more calories per day just to maintain core temperature. In a deep winter scenario, your primary strategy shifts to rabbit snaring as the foundation, supplemented by ice fishing through a single maintained hole if possible. And your most critical prep item isn't a weapon or a fishing rod, it's stored calories. Canned goods, rice, dried beans. Winter survival without stored food is a losing equation regardless of skill level. I say that not to discourage anyone, but because honesty about limitations is more useful than false confidence. I also want to be upfront about something else. I don't know what the legal landscape looks like for trot lines, limb lines, fish traps, and snares in your specific state under normal conditions. Many states restrict or prohibit some of these methods during peacetime because they're too effective. They deplete fisheries and game populations if everyone used them recreationally. Check your state's regulations. In a genuine sustained crisis, legality becomes secondary to survival, but right now, while you're learning and practicing, follow the law. Several states allow trot lines and limb lines with permits. Practice where it's legal so you have the skill when you might need it. This is the part I promised, and it's the piece that pulled everything together for me during the Hicks course. It's a 72-hour food procurement timeline for a family of 4, starting from the moment you decide it's time to feed yourselves from the land. The first 4 hours, don't fish, don't hunt, secure water, and build or improve shelter. Every calorie you spend exposed to elements without adequate shelter is a calorie wasted. Fill every container you own from the nearest moving water source. Get a fire established for boiling from hour 4 to hour 8. Build and set passive systems. This is your single most important block of time. Set one trot line with as many hooks as you have, minimum 10, in the nearest fishable water. Bait with whatever you can find. Worms dug from the bank, insects, scraps, raw meat from your freezer if the power is out and it's thawing. Set 10 to 15 limb lines along the same waterway. Build and set 10 squirrel snares and 10 rabbit snares along visible game trails. Total time, roughly 4 hours. Total caloric cost, about 1,200 calories. By sundown on day 1, you have 35 to 50 passive capture devices working for you around the clock. By the evening of day 1, rest. Manage your fire, boil water, check your lines and snares at dawn. On the first morning, a realistic expectation is 3 to 6 fish from your trot line and limb lines, plus 1 to 3 small game from your snares. That's roughly 2,000 to 4,500 calories harvested, produced while you slept. Days 2 and 3. Expand and refine. Add more snares where you found tracks. Move unproductive limb lines to better locations. If you're near a shallow creek, start constructing a fish weir for long-term production. By the end of day 3, a well-managed passive system in decent habitat during warm months can produce 4,000 to 8,000 calories per day. A family of 4 needs roughly 8,000 to 10,000 calories daily to maintain function. You won't hit full sufficiency in 72 hours on passive methods alone, but you'll cover 40 to 80% of your needs, and the gap closes as you add more traps and learn the local game patterns. And only now, on day 3 or 4, after your passive systems are running and producing, do you consider active hunting. Take the rifle out at dawn. Sit a deer trail. If you get one, it's a 2-week windfall that changes everything. If you don't, you haven't starved because the snares and trot lines were feeding you while you waited. That sequencing is the entire lesson, and it's worth repeating. The guys who survive aren't the best hunters or the best fishermen. They're the ones who build systems first and hunt second. Every military survival school in the world teaches this same priority: passive procurement before active pursuit. The reason most civilians get it backwards is because we've been trained by recreation. We grab a rod, we grab a rifle, we go do the thing. In survival, the thing that saves you is the thing that works while you're not doing anything at all. You probably own most of what you need already: paracord, hooks, sinkers, snare wire, a knife. Put them in one bag, know where that bag is, and know the sequence: shelter, water, passive systems, then hunt. The skills you already have aren't wrong. They're just incomplete. Now they're not.